277 was added.
Okay.
It's not on there because it just came out of, we just made that decision earlier.
Which one is that?
Carpet samples.
Okay. And who is that?
Bruce Broderick.
Okay, we will call the meeting to order. And for an announcement purpose, HB 277 by Representative Broderick passed out of subcommittee a few minutes ago. And so we're going to add it to the agenda, and but we'll hear it towards the end of the agenda. We're going to start with House Bill 94, Representative Williams. This is the new and improved version, right?
Mr. Chairman, that is correct. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Committee members, was before you last week with HB 94. We're now looking at Committee Sub LC 344577S. Just to briefly recap, this started out as an effort to assist members of the military who deregistered their motor vehicles. It was broadened somewhat in subcommittee to encompass other situations where motor vehicles were deregistered, and then at the desire of this committee last week, the language was tweaked starting on line 18 down through line 21 to make it more clear, if you will, about the what triggers the provisions of this bill. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I will stand for any questions.
Are there questions? Hearing none, what's the pleasure of the committee? All right, there's a motion, second to pass. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
House Bill 289, Chairman Parsons.
Thank you, Chairman.
What? Okay.
This bill, all it does is it extends the sunset by 1 year to June 30th, 2016 for the exemption for motor fuel tax on public transportation systems and campus transportation systems. That's all it does, is it just extends it for 1 year.
Okay. Are there questions? Hearing none, what's the pleasure of the committee? Is there a second? The motion is second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion's carried. Bill is moved to rules. House Bill 369, Chairman Nix.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 369 is a bill that would change the process for doing an e-SPLOST. As it is now, there are situations where a city school or a smaller school system can hold up an e-SPLOST by requiring that they get a certain amount of money before going forward. This particular bill would say that if they don't come to an agreement of how it would be divided, they can go forward with the e-SPLOST, and it would simply be divided per FTE or by student. If they have a workable agreement, and most systems have a workable agreement, they still do that. That's provided for. But in the event that they get to a stalemate and they cannot come to an agreement, they would be able to go forward. And that is the bill, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Nix. Questions of the author? What's your number?
Is this an e-SPLOST or e-LOST?
e-SPLOST.
Okay.
Any other questions? Do I hear a motion? All right, second? All right, there's a motion, second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? It is passed on to rules. And while you're right there, why don't we hear House Bill 374?
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, House Bill 374 is simply to insert the word forestry in terms of equipment that will be exempt from ad valorem taxation. The original intent was that forestry equipment would be would be separated, would not have to pay it. But somehow it has not been handled that way simply because the word forestry was not there. This simply adds one word on line 18 so that forestry equipment is included.
Okay. And my understanding, it's always been intended to be included in that kind of equipment, but it just never was specifically placed in the statute. Is
Yes,
that
even
correct?
the original author who was in the committee meeting the other day said that was the intent.
Okay. Any questions of the author? Do I hear a motion? Is there a second? Motion and second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Any opposed? Passed on the rules. Thank you, sir.
Very much.
HB 396, Chairman Knight.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This bill does two things. Section 1, basically, right now, under the law, the tax commissioners have to charge a penalty of 10% of the total amount due. In other words, the total amount on the bill. This is cleanup language. With technology and all, they can now track partial payments. So, in essence, they're now restricted under the law. If someone makes a partial payment and they've already collected a part of the balance due, they still have to issue a 10% penalty on the full amount. So Section 1 simply allows them to do it on whatever the balance due is. Section 2, as members of the committee and the General Assembly know, we are phasing out the amount of sales, property tax. I think this is the last year or next year will be the last. This is the last year. Remember, we had a 5-year phase out of our 0.25 of a mil. And under current law, the statute makes it unlawful for someone to obstruct a levy officer who's attempting to execute a state tax execution. And what this does is simply prepare for next year, such that the locals, we're changing it such that the local person who is doing that levy, whether it's a commissioner, sheriff, ex officio sheriff, municipal person, that now you can't obstruct them at the local level. And that's what this bill does.
Okay, questions of the author? Representative Carson.
Thank you, Chairman Knight, for bringing this forward. In regard to lines 20, 21, and 22, is this already in practice? In other words, this would not have a fiscal impact or a real monetary impact or operational impact on the DOR. Is this something that's really more cleanup language in regard to how the DOR can operate, or is already operating in regard to these penalty calculations?
Well, obviously on the penalty, we're in our last year, which is now would be what, 0.05
Of the mil, yeah.
of 1 mil. So I think it's insignificant from
Right.
a point of view of that. But what this really affects is our local tax commissioners. Again, it's at their point, they're having to charge a penalty on the total amount of the bill, even though the taxpayer or property owner has come in and has submitted, before a partial payment before the due date, and then, maybe there's some that's remaining, and they're having to go back and assess a penalty on the total balance due because that's what is in code. So I don't think there's a fiscal effect at all to the state.
Any other questions? Do I hear a motion?
Move to pass.
All right, there's a motion and a second discussion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It's passed the rules. Okay, HB 238, Representative Harbin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 238 is the expansion and construction of the aquarium. What we have done is capped the state's exposure to $750,000, working with the Department of Revenue on how they will actually be able to operate with that cap, and that's why we're operating off a substitute. I think everything else was language dealing with sales tax for locals, but that's all we're doing is the state's exposure will be capped at $750,000 on the sales tax during the construction, and it ends in January 1st, 2017.
Okay, are there questions? And the department's okay with this language dealing with the refund as opposed to a cap on the actual sales tax liability being
Yes, sir.
paid in.
They've worked with us and were very good and helped us to get the language just the way it should be.
Okay. Any other questions? Do I hear a motion? All right, there's a motion and a second to do pass. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes on to rules. All right, the next two bills, House Bill 390 and House Bill 426, were passed out of subcommittee because we are tight on time, but subject to the receipt of a fiscal note, which we have not yet received. So even though we were hopeful that we would receive it by full committee, we have not. So those will not be heard today, but they will be. We will have another full committee probably on Thursday to catch whatever loose ends that we've still got. So we'll be in touch on 390 and 426. House Bill 457, Representative Hawkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You have, in committee, you have LC 2875, hold on, excuse me, 4590S, substitute to 457. This bill addresses watercrafts in the state of Georgia. You know, a number of years ago, we took the inventory tax off of automobiles and actually took them off boats also, but we had a sunset provision on there. That sunset ran out. And what we're doing is trying to help our boat owners throughout the state and put that take away the sunset and help them with this tax situation. You know, we have a situation where places like Hall County, and I know that some of the areas that you live in, you'll have boat dealers there that actually are tied to the larger dealers in the big cities. But they'll come out and have ancillary shops and hold boats there. It makes it very difficult for them to be paying this inventory tax. It's very hard to compete, especially in the outer edges of the state with South Carolina and some of the other states. And also for us in the Hall County area, we're shipping a lot of boats to the big boat show there in Atlanta, so we help the major boat manufacturers by moving those boats. And so we're holding those on lots, and we would like to keep our dealers in Hall County. So I would ask you to vote in favor of this bill to allow this inventory tax to vanish for these folks. And this will be, as you see on line 30, will begin on 2016. We cannot do it this year because of constitutional legality of going backwards with the ad valorem tax.
Who's 27? Jeff. Representative Duncan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just want to thank my colleague on the other side of Lake Lanier for bringing this forward.
Sure.
Appreciate that.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right, any other questions? What's the pleasure of committee? There's a motion. There's a motion and a second. We haven't voted yet.
Oh.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? I think y'all need to ask him a few more questions. He's too anxious.
I was just telling you hurry this along. Also trying to get back to regulated industries. We got a chairman down there that's...
Do I hear a motion to table?
Please, no, these folks need this.
All right. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? It passes on the rules. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
All right, Representative Williamson, HB 464.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Not yet. Now you are.
Thank you, 21.
I got you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I have for you a committee substitute to House Bill 464, LC 344583S. This bill is going to simply repeal at the end of 2016 two never used tax credits under both Section 1 and Section 2. Section 3 caps tax credit that is currently being used, and this just protects the any kind of out of control from the taxpayer's perspective. It just caps it at $30 million per calendar year, which is right in the range that it's being used currently. Be happy to answer any questions.
Are there questions? What's the pleasure? Is there a second? Motion and second do pass. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Passes on to rules. HB 277, Representative Broderick.
Mr. Chairman and committee, I want to personally thank you for letting me come forward today simply after our subcommittee meeting. And with HB 277, we are working from LC 344453. And what we're trying to do is reflect the evolution somewhat of the flooring industry, which is a major employer here in the state, over 35,000 employees and sales in tens of billions of dollars. Reflect the evolution of the flooring industry going from being the carpet capital of the world to the flooring capital of the world with other resilient flooring, and this as it relates to flooring samples and the way they are taxed. There is a fiscal note attached, and it was a pretty broad brush as far as what they estimated the tax impact would be, anywhere from 150 to 500,000. But if you look at the last paragraph, they did indicate that it was insufficient data to make an accurate hypothetical loss of the sample tax revenue. And again, what we're doing is we're treating all flooring samples equally as far as taxation at 21.9% of the raw material value used in producing those samples. They did indicate that there were 1,451 establishments in Georgia that do sell flooring, so it is a Georgia-based business, not only as a manufacturer but also as far as retailers go. And so I would appreciate your consideration of the bill. It would help an industry that suffered through with the housing slump and is on the rebound, and goes all the way up the I-75 corridor, but you can think all the way down to I-85 down the LaGrange area. They're manufacturers and distributors throughout the state.
Are there questions of the author?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Appreciate it. A moment to look at this bill. I'm sorry I'm late, by the way. I didn't realize you'd be two bills from the end by the time I got here.
We're quick.
Yeah, I guess the question is that what sales tax revenue is coming in from this right now? Is this
It's a use tax.
a use tax revenue? Yeah. What use tax is coming in from this whole thing right now? Yeah, I'm looking at it, but it says, does this go to zero now? Is this?
No, it does not. What we do, we're changing in the original legislation that gave the reduction to carpet samples down to 21.9% of the raw material cost. We changed that in the original language to all flooring samples, which include resilient, hardwood, laminate.
Right.
So we treat all flooring samples equally as far as taxation.
Okay. And so these samples are sold? Is that?
No, they are provided by the manufacturer.
Why are we even taxing this, I guess is my question.
Because it's like, according to what they told us at subcommittee, it's like advertising materials. So if I've got brochures or other advertising materials, because there is not a value, they value those at the cost of the materials. We had previously dealt with this several years ago on the carpet industry and had reached the decision that 21.9 cents was of the materials was a fair cost to assess a use tax, and so all he's doing is doing that same cost for other floor covering materials. It's an arbitrary number, but that's what these. Yeah. I mean, the subcommittee heard it, and they also saw the fiscal note. And
thank you.
Okay.
I'd like to thank the author for bringing the bill in sort of the similar vein that Chairman Rice has raised eyebrows. I, for one, I'm still at a loss of why we're taxing this anyhow. It's a hugely important industry. It's part of our manufacturing base. I don't quite understand why we would cut a little bitty square piece of carpet or a little piece of parquet flooring that's going to be used to further manufacturing in Georgia, and that's where real wealth is created through one of the places that real wealth is created in manufacturing, mining, farming. And so I thank you for bringing the bill, although I share the sentiments of Chairman Rice. I think we ought to keep an eye on just making this whole tax go away for our important manufacturing industry. So that's in the way of, isn't that?
Exactly. Thank you.
I turned off your mic.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
No, I'm just playing. We do appreciate you bringing forward the bill, and it provides some consistency in Georgia law because there certainly evidently was uncertainty in the industry as to how to deal with these other floor coverings.
Exactly, and since the original legislation, again, the trend in the industry has changed. All of these industries have diversified into these other product lines, and so I think it's fair to make it consistent across the board, and it does provide a administrative help to the industry to treat it that way.
Are there other questions for the author? What's the pleasure of the committee?
Move to pass.
All right, there's a motion, second to pass. Is there discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes on to rules.
Thank you
sir.
very much. And the industry thanks all of you.
House Bill 81, Representative Turner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members of the committee. HB 81 takes on the fairly complicated issue of super liens. This is a process where a tax sale property may be bid up well beyond what is sellable at open market or on fair market value. And as such, when it goes through this process of redemption, somebody may be able to take a small lien that is not valid, is not a valid lien against the property, and be able to jump to first lien status. So what we have worked out through several subcommittees, through the work of the chairman and folks at Gato, I've heard from Bankers Associations, is what we created is a 300-day waiting period for those junior liens to get that status. We've also created the levy date as the point for frozen in time to deal with these, and also for people who have judgment or have attained judgment creditor and are on record with the superior, or the clerk of the Superior Court in the county where the property is located. If you have any questions of the applicants.
Are there questions of the author? I think this went through about 3 or 4 or 5 committees, hearings and subcommittee, and I want to thank you and thank Chairman Harrell for working on this so diligently to bring it before the committee.
I would be remiss if I did not personally thank the committee and Chairman Powell and Chairman Harrell. There was a lot of work into this particular bill, and we had feedback from all kinds of folks to make sure we were getting this right.
Okay, Representative Carson.
Representative Turner, my Cherokee County colleague, I just want to thank you for bringing this. And I think we want to wrap up this meeting very quickly, but could you give us a quick 20 seconds in regard to the constituent that had this issue for the benefit of the committee?
We had a gentleman who had a home, $100,000 value, that ended up passing away. His family fought over what was going to happen with the land. For 2 years they fought. The tax commissioner had no choice but to send it out for tax sale. About $4,000 in past due taxes. It was sold at tax sale for about $120,000. Another lien for about $300 as a result of his medical bills was found, and the folks who were kind of the bad actors here used that $300 to go to foreclose within 3 months of the tax sale and take the house, the excess funds, and let the family with nothing.
Any other questions? What's the pleasure of the committee? Is there a second? Motion and a second do pass. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Passes on the rules. Thank you, sir. I don't think we have any other bills. We only went through about 9 or 10 in 20 minutes. I appreciate the work of the subcommittees. It makes the full committee's work a whole lot easier because the subcommittees really are working hard, and I appreciate all of y'all giving the time that it takes to perfect these bills. If there is no other business, we will, with this one announcement, we will probably have a brief meeting. This one was brief too. A brief meeting on Thursday to deal with some of the things that we've been waiting for fiscal notes on, and we will get those out of here and hopefully onto the floor before day 30. So we are adjourned.